Hey guys, what's up? Pratik here and welcome to my very first Cinema 4D tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to create this grungy concrete type of text effect. We're going to create this infinite floor look, we're going to add some shadows. So let's just hop into Cinema and build this dude up. So I'm in Cinema 4D R13 with this default glory. And let's first of all add some text in our scene. So let's go to MoGraph and no text. This adds a text in our scene. And of course we don't want to put text as our renderer, we want to write something interesting, so I'll write as CODE, code. It's the most interesting word I've ever come up with. Next let's change the font to Typograph Pro. Boom, we have some nice fire looking font. Let's change the height, it's looking like a dinosaur, and let's go to caps and select fillet cap and fillet cap. Make the start steps to 3 and the end steps to 3 as well. So this gives us some nice definition around the edges of the text. So if you render this out, it will look something like this. Next let's go back to the object mode and increase the depth a bit to bring out the 3D of the text. So that looks pretty good. Now let's add the floor and let's add a sky. And now let's go to the floor and right click the floor and go to Cinema 4D tags and select compositing. And before we do anything, I'm gonna just show you how it looks right now. So it looks something like this. We can see that the sky and the floor are not properly blended with each other. So we want the sky and the floor to properly blend with each other so that we can create that infinite floor look. So in order to do that, make sure that you add the compositing tag to the floor, and then we have all these cool options to play around with. So the options that we're going to only bother right now is going to be only that compositing background option, and also you can check out the other options as well. It's no harm in checking, but the compositing background, if you check this option and if you add some materials, let's add a material. Let's go to texture, gradient, boom, click on gradient. Let's add a nice vignette and let's make this 2D circular. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's increase this a bit so it comes towards the center. Let's put this to the floor and make sure that the arrow is pointing downwards to apply the material to any of the objects in your scene, and put that to the sky as well. Next we have to change some of the things. First of all, if we render this out, then we can still see that there is a tiling effect. This is mainly because our projection is spherical, and spherical is actually making the repetitions of the texture that we have actually applied. So what we can do is that make sure that the material is selected and change the projection from flat to frontal, and do the same thing to the sky as well. So now if you render, so we can see that we have that infinite floor look, and it looks pretty good. Now what we want to do is that I want to align that text properly with the floor, because it's actually intersecting with the floor and it's not looking that good. So make sure the floor is selected and move it to the top. We can align this later on, but for the meantime it looks okay. Next let's add some shadows. So in order to add shadows in Cinema 4D, just go to the render settings, go to effect and click on ambient occlusion. Increase the contrast to 10% and close this out. So now if you render, we can see that we have some nice shadows with some nice contrast, and it looks pretty good. And now let's make the grungy text look on our text. So in order to do that, make another material, go to the color, in the texture tab go to load image, and this is where you're gonna pick up your grungy texture. You can get these textures from Google or from DeviantArt or from any other stock sites like Flickr or etc. And I'm going to use this texture, so click on it and select open. It asks you to create a separate directory, just click on no, and that applies your texture to your null material. Next let's go to the reflection and add a bit of reflection, because we're going to add lights and we want the lights to hit these textures and bring out some of the details of the texture. So I'm going to use a Fresnel shader and I'm going to decrease it that much. I'm going to decrease the brightness as well. Next go back to the color option, right click the texture and go to copy, and then select the bump, right click the texture on the bump and select paste, and then increase this and I'll show you why we're actually using this, because later on you'll understand why we are actually using the bumpiness. And these all looks good. Let's close this out and let's add the material to the text. And now if you render, you'll see that we have some problems. First problem is that the texture, that is the grungy texture that we're applied, it's not properly wrapping the text up. We're not getting any of the grungy elements at all. In fact, all the grungy elements are at the top part of the text. So if you render this out now, so you can see that we can still see some slight faint grungy going on the top part of the text, but we want that to apply uniformly on the text completely. So in order to do that, I learned this from the Grayscale Gorilla. It's a very interesting trick to actually map textures. So what you have to do is that make sure that the text, the material is selected, then right click the material and go to fit to region, and just drag around the region where your 3D text resides, and then just release the mouse button, and now we can see that we have some proper grungy looking text. So now if you render, so now we can see that our grungy text has been properly mapped on the 3D text, and it already looks good without even adding some lights and all those cool stuffs. So it looks pretty good. So now let's just move on and add the lights. Now to add lights, you can of course go here and add some of the lights and play around with it, but what I like to do is that I like to use the Grayscale Gorilla HDRI Light Kit Pro and use a softbox. If you don't like to play around with those lights in the inbuilt lights of Cinema 4D, what you can do is that you can go to GFXBUDDY's YouTube channel and download the infinite background as well as the softbox. The softbox you can use, it's pretty easy to use and it's pretty simple, and moreover it's pretty fun, and plus it's free. So I'm gonna use the Grayscale Gorilla because I paid $169 for it, and that's why I'm not gonna use the free stuff. So let's go to the Grayscale Gorilla part and double click on the overhead softbox and close this out, and now we have an overhead softbox. So now if you render, then we can see that now we can actually explain the bumpiness part. So because of adding those bumpiness, we can actually get some slight details around the texture, as you can see right here, and it looks all good and interesting. So now we have to adjust some of the settings. So let's go to the overhead softbox and increase the brightness, and let's increase the radius decay, and let's make the shadow none because we already added shadows using AO, and all these looks pretty good. The next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Motex, go to the caps and make it 5 and 5, and now let's render and see how it looks. So there you go, there you have that grungy concrete type of look. And the reason for adding more caps is that the lights are now hitting on the top part of the text, and it's creating these nice highlights, which looks pretty good. So there you go, there you have that grungy concrete type of text. And the good thing about this is that you can actually change the look of this by using different textures. So for example, instead of using matte, if I use something like some different type of textures like this one, click OK, no, right click the texture, copy, and go to the bump channel, right click, paste. And now if you render, we get entirely different look. Now we have some more noisiness and all these cool stuffs. So you just play around with these and achieve something different, and looks pretty good, you know. So the next thing we can do is that we can actually zoom in a bit, and although we are actually going out of the demarcation of the render region, we can simply increase it by going to the output option of the render settings and make it 1280 by 720. And now I have to push it back a bit, and now if you render, so now we have a very close-up look of the text, and it looks pretty good. You can play around with different textures, you can add even more fillet caps and all those cool stuffs, and this is the basic idea of this tutorial, to make you familiar with some of the text editing settings and to create something cool in Cinema 4D. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. I am Pratik, and I'll see you in some of my new tutorials that are going to be coming up later on. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye guys.